She lay on the hard stones with her thin arms wrapped tightly around her body. The night was cold, and the sharp edges of the rocks pressed into her back until it felt like her bones would crack. 16 nights had passed like this, each one colder and harder than the last. She had no blanket, no fire, no roof above her head. The stars above looked far away, like they were mocking her suffering. Every time the wind blew, dust entered her eyes, and her lips became dry and cracked. She was once a daughter of a proud clan, but now she was nothing more than a rejected shadow, left to survive on the street. Her stomach growled every night, but there was no food. She had tried to eat scraps once, the leftover skin of alien fruit, but even that was stolen from her hands by others who were stronger. They laughed when she cried. They told her she was worthless, that no one wanted her, that even her master had thrown her away. The stones became her bed, the street became her home, and the darkness became her only companion. On the 16th night, her body was so weak that she could barely move. Her hair was tangled, her feet cut from walking barefoot, and her once bright eyes now looked empty. She tried to sleep, but the pain from the stones and the hunger inside her would not let her rest. She turned from one side to another, hoping to find a softer place, but the ground was unkind everywhere. Each shift sent sharp jolts through her body. She whispered to herself in her alien tongue, words that sounded broken even to her own ears. Sometimes she prayed to gods that never answered. Sometimes she cursed them. Sometimes she simply stayed silent because no words could match the pain inside her chest. The passersby did not care. Some looked at her with disgust, others with cold eyes that pretended she was invisible. Once, a child threw a pebble at her, laughing when it hit her arm. She did not respond. She had no strength left to shout or fight back. Instead, she curled tighter into herself, hugging her knees as if her own body was the only shield she had left in the world. The nights were worse than the days. During the day, at least, the sun gave a little warmth and the crowd's noise distracted her from her misery. But at night, the silence screamed at her, and the cold wrapped around her bones like iron chains. Every shadow seemed alive. Every distant step sounded like a threat. She remembered the warmth of her clan's fire from long ago and the taste of bread her mother once made. Those memories cut her heart deeper than the stones cut her back. She wondered if dying would be easier than living one more night on this cruel ground. But her spirit, though broken, was not fully gone. Somewhere inside her, a small spark remained, a tiny voice that told her she had to endure. Each time her eyelids closed, she whispered, "Just one more night." Yet 16 nights had already passed, and she no longer believed there would ever be an end. On that same 16th night, something unusual happened. Far across the empty street, footsteps echoed, heavy boots, steady and strong. She froze. Usually, footsteps at night meant danger, thieves, guards, or cruel men who liked to torment the weak. Her body tensed, ready to run if she could, though she knew she had no energy left for escape. The steps grew closer, and she held her breath. A figure stopped in the shadows, only a few steps away. She could not see his face clearly, but the outline of his body told her it was not one of her kind. Too broad, too solid, too different. Her heart beat faster. A human. She had heard stories of humans. Some called them violent, some called them proud, but most called them dangerous. Her clan had warned her never to trust one. But what did warnings matter to her now? She had already been abandoned by her own people. The human did not speak. He only stood there, watching. She tried to hide her face, ashamed of her condition, ashamed of her dirt-covered skin and trembling frame. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence between them felt like another weight on her chest. Finally, the human turned and walked away, leaving only the sound of his boots fading into the night. Her eyes stung with tears she had not allowed herself to shed for days. Why had he stopped? Why had he looked at her? Was it pity? Was it judgment? She hated herself for caring, but the thought stayed in her mind. Someone had noticed her. Someone had seen her suffering, even if only for a few seconds. That small moment lit the spark inside her just enough to keep her breathing through the rest of the night. When dawn came, she was still lying on the stones, her body stiff and aching. But in her heart, something was different. She could not explain it, but the memory of those heavy human footsteps gave her a strange kind of strength. For 16 nights, she had been invisible, But now, perhaps, she was not. Perhaps the world had not completely forgotten her. Perhaps the 17th night would not be the same as the others. She pushed herself up slowly, every muscle screaming in pain, and looked toward the horizon where the sun was rising. For the first time in weeks, her lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into a small sign of life. The stones beneath her were still cruel, but her heart whispered that change was coming. Somewhere, the human who had seen her was still walking these streets, and deep inside she wondered if their paths would cross again. The human soldier stood in the shadow of an old wall, his eyes fixed on the frail figure curled on the stones. He had seen many things in his life: wars, blood, betrayal. But this sight pressed on his chest in a way no battlefield ever had. A young alien woman, shivering like a dying bird, left to sleep on rocks as if she was no better than dirt. 16 nights he had watched her from afar, not always close enough for her to notice, but close enough to see her pain. Every night she returned to the same spot, as if the hard stones had become her prison. He could not understand why no one else cared. People walked past her during the day, pretending she did not exist. At night, the guards ignored her, as if she was just another piece of broken trash on the ground. To him, it made no sense. He had fought in wars across galaxies, and even enemies on the battlefield gave each other dignity in death. Yet here, a living being was treated as less than an animal. The soldier leaned against the wall, his hands tightening into fists. His orders in this city were simple: observe, keep peace, avoid trouble with the alien clans. Humans were already seen as intruders, as outsiders who didn't belong. If he interfered, if he tried to help her, it could bring punishment on him, or even worse, conflict between his people and hers. He knew the risks. But still, every night, when he heard her cough or saw her thin body shaking in the cold, the weight inside his heart grew heavier. He remembered his own past, nights when he too had been alone and hungry, before he became a soldier. Back then, a stranger had given him bread when he was starving, a small act that had saved his life. That memory haunted him now, whispering that he could not just stand and do nothing. But this was different. This was not his world, not his people. Still, every time he tried to walk away, his feet would stop. His eyes would turn back to the girl on the stones. On the 16th night, he saw her more closely than ever. She was curled tightly, her body trembling as if the cold had entered her bones. He could see her lips moving faintly, maybe praying, maybe talking to herself, maybe begging the sky for mercy. The soldier's throat tightened. Something inside him broke. He took a step forward, then stopped. His training told him to stay away, to remain invisible, but his heart pulled him closer. He crouched low, watching her carefully. Her face, though covered in dirt, still held traces of beauty, but it was the sadness in her eyes that struck him. Those were not the eyes of a weak creature. They were the eyes of someone who had been betrayed by the very people who should have protected her. He thought of how the alien clans always spoke of honor and pride. Yet here they left one of their own to die in the streets. His jaw tightened in anger. How could they claim to be superior while treating her like this? He felt disgust, not for the girl, but for the society that had thrown her away. The soldier reached into his pack and pulled out a small piece of bread. It was not much, just part of his ration, but to her, it could mean survival. He hesitated, staring at the bread in his hand. If he gave it to her, she might reject it out of fear. If others saw, it could cause rumors. He imagined the punishment, his superiors calling him reckless, the aliens calling him a lawbreaker. Yet none of those images scared him as much as the thought of walking away and letting her die. He stepped forward, slowly, his boots scraping against the stone road. The sound made the girl's head jerk up, her wide eyes filled with fear. She looked at him as if he was a predator, come to finish her off. Her body pressed tighter into the ground, like a hunted animal with no escape. The soldier raised his free hand in peace and knelt a few feet away. He did not speak at first, afraid his voice would frighten her more. Instead, he placed the bread gently on the ground between them and slid it closer. The girl's eyes darted from the bread to his face. She shook her head weakly, whispering something he could not understand. It sounded like refusal, but also fear. Her hands trembled, yet her gaze stayed fixed on the food. The soldier's voice came out low and steady. "Take it," he said. Simple words, hoping she would understand the tone, if not the language. For a long moment, she did not move. Then, with shaking fingers, she reached out and pulled the bread close, hugging it to her chest as if afraid someone might snatch it away. She did not eat right away. Instead, she looked at him with confusion in her eyes, as if she could not believe a human would help her. The soldier gave a small nod and stood up, stepping back into the shadows. He did not wait for thanks. He did not need it. What mattered was that she would live another night. Still, as he walked away, her face stayed in his mind. That mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief cut deeper than any wound he had ever taken. He knew he could not keep this secret forever. If others discovered what he was doing, it would bring trouble. But something inside him told him this was only the beginning. 16 nights she had been alone, but now, whether she wanted it or not, she was no longer invisible. Someone had seen her. Someone had chosen not to turn away. And as he disappeared into the dark alleys, he whispered to himself, "Tomorrow night, I will not just watch." He knew he was crossing a line that could change everything, yet he also knew he could not stop now. The girl on the stones had become more than a stranger. She had become a test of his own humanity. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with the smell of wet dust. The alien girl sat with her knees drawn close, holding the piece of bread the human had given her the night before. She had eaten it slowly, bite by bite, afraid that if she finished too quickly, the gift would disappear like a dream. The bread had been dry, but to her, it had tasted like the finest meal she had ever known. Still, fear burned in her chest. Why had he helped her? What did he want in return? In her world, no one gave without taking something back. The human soldier returned that night. She noticed his steps first, slow and careful, echoing on the stones. Her heart raced. She thought of running, but her body was too weak, and besides, where could she go? When he appeared from the shadows, she pressed her back against the wall, as if the rough stone could protect her. His tall figure blocked part of the streetlight, and for a moment she thought he looked like a monster. Yet his eyes were steady, not cruel, and his hands were empty. He crouched a short distance from her, watching silently. Then he reached into his pack again and pulled out another small ration, this time not just bread, but a thin blanket folded neatly. He placed it carefully on the ground between them, the way someone would place an offering before a frightened animal. He did not push it toward her this time. He simply waited. Her throat tightened. The blanket looked soft, so much softer than the stones she had known for 16 nights. Yet her mind screamed warnings. What if this was a trap? What if he wanted to claim her, to own her like her old master had? She shook her head quickly, whispering in her broken voice, "No, no." The soldier spoke, his words calm and low, as if he knew she could not understand them, but could feel their meaning. He tapped the blanket gently, then pointed to her, then to the ground, as if saying, "This is for you. Sleep, not suffer." His eyes did not carry hunger or greed, only a steady kind of stubborn kindness. Tears burned in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. Her people had called humans beasts, savages who lived only for war and conquest. Yet here was one, kneeling in the dust, offering her comfort no one else had given. Her chest ached with confusion. She wanted to trust, but trust was dangerous. Trust had already destroyed her life once. The soldier seemed to understand her hesitation. Slowly, he spread the blanket on the ground himself, smoothing it out. Then, to her shock, he sat on the cold stones beside it, leaving the blanket untouched. His meaning was clear. He was not forcing her. He would not take it back. It was hers, if she chose. Her hands shook as she crawled forward, each movement slow and cautious. She touched the blanket with the tips of her fingers, almost expecting it to vanish. When it did not, she pulled it close, clutching it tightly to her chest. The soldier gave a small nod, then leaned back against the wall, his eyes turned to the dark sky. For the first time in weeks, warmth spread across her body. The blanket carried the faint smell of the soldier's camp, of smoke and metal, but to her it smelled like safety. She curled under it, her breathing shallow but calmer. The stones beneath her were still hard, but the barrier between her skin and the cold felt like a miracle. Yet even as comfort touched her, fear whispered again. What if her clan saw this? What if the guards reported her? The punishment would be terrible, not just for her, but for him too. She lifted her head slightly, staring at the human beside her. His eyes were closed, but his hand rested near the hilt of his weapon, ready in case of danger. He looked strong, dangerous, but also protective. Her lips parted, and before she could stop herself, words escaped in a trembling whisper. Why? The human's eyes opened. He looked at her, not with confusion, but as if he had been expecting the question. He touched his chest with one hand and said softly, "Because no one deserves stones as a bed." She did not fully understand the words, but something in his tone reached her heart. For a long while, she stayed silent, then finally lowered her head back to the blanket. She closed her eyes, though sleep did not come quickly. Every sound still made her flinch. Every shadow still felt like a threat. But beneath it all, one thought lingered. This human was different. The night stretched on. The human did not leave. He stayed near, sitting quietly, as if to guard her from the darkness. She realized then that for the first time in 16 nights, she was not alone. That thought was both terrifying and comforting. When the faint light of dawn touched the streets, she stirred awake. The soldier was still there, his back against the wall, his eyes watching the horizon. She felt strange, stronger, though her body was still weak. The blanket was wrapped tightly around her, and her heart beat with a rhythm she had almost forgotten, hope. But as she sat up, her fear returned sharp and heavy. If anyone discovered this, if anyone saw her accepting a human's help, the punishment would be severe. She looked at him with wide eyes, whispering in a voice filled with panic, "If my clan knows, they will kill us both." The soldier met her gaze, calm and unflinching. He did not answer with fear. Instead, he gave her a look that seemed to say he was ready to face whatever came. She could not understand why he would risk himself for her. She only knew that the world had changed on the 17th night. She was no longer just the girl sleeping on stones. She was now the girl the human had chosen to help. The 17th night came with heavy clouds that swallowed the moon. The air was colder than all the nights before, and the wind screamed through the narrow streets like a hungry beast. The alien girl sat on the stones once again, her blanket clutched tight around her shoulders. But even that small gift could not fight the storm. The rain began suddenly, striking her skin like needles, soaking her hair and clothes until her body shook with violent shivers. Her lips turned blue, her fingers stiff, and every breath came out as a weak mist in the freezing air. She tried to curl into herself, but the water pooled beneath her, the stones biting harder than ever. She whispered prayers, but her voice was lost in the storm. From the shadows, the human soldier watched. He had kept his distance the last few days, offering help quietly, letting her decide whether to take it. But tonight was different. He saw her body trembling uncontrollably, saw her hands claw at the wet ground as if she could find warmth there. His jaw tightened. He could no longer wait. If he left her like this, she would not survive until morning. He stepped out from the darkness, rain sliding down his armor, his boots splashing in the water. She looked up in fear, her eyes wide and wild. The storm made every sound sharper, every flash of lightning more frightening. She thought perhaps he had come to drag her away, that this was the moment her people's warnings had become true. She pushed herself back against the wall, her voice shaking. "No, don't, they will kill us." But the human crouched beside her, his hand steady, his eyes burning not with cruelty, but with urgency. "You cannot stay here tonight," he said firmly, though she could only understand his tone, not his words. He reached out and touched the edge of the blanket, then gestured to follow him. She shook her head weakly, fear holding her tighter than the cold. "My clan," she whispered, her teeth chattering. "If they find me with you, they will kill me. They will kill you too." The soldier leaned closer, his voice rising over the roar of the storm. "If you stay here, the stones will kill you before they do." His eyes held hers with a fire that seemed unshakable. He was not asking. He was commanding her to live. Her heart pounded. Every warning, every teaching from her people told her humans were not to be trusted. Yet everything she had suffered told her that no one else cared whether she lived or died. Her breath came ragged, her body too weak to resist. The cold was sinking deeper, turning her into stone herself. At last, she let out a broken sob, her head falling forward. She no longer had the strength to argue. The soldier lifted her gently, his arms firm but careful. She gasped at the sudden warmth of his body against her frozen skin. She had forgotten what it felt like to be held. He carried her through the rain, his steps quick, his eyes scanning the empty streets. Each shadow could hide a spy, each corner could bring her clan's guards. But he did not slow. He moved with the determination of a man who had already chosen his path, no matter the cost. They reached a small shelter tucked away behind ruined walls. Inside, it was dark but dry, a place the soldier had prepared for himself. He set her down on a cot, the closest thing to a bed she had seen in weeks. The fabric was rough, but compared to stones, it felt like heaven. She curled into it instinctively, her body still trembling. He removed his cloak and placed it over her, the heavy fabric instantly covering her like a shield. She looked at him with wide eyes, her lips trembling as she whispered again, "They will kill us." Her voice was weak, but her fear was strong. She believed her words. If her people discovered this, they would not forgive her. The soldier knelt beside her, his face calm but firm. "Then let them try," he said softly, though she did not understand the words. Still, she understood the way his hand rested near his weapon, the way his eyes carried a promise. He was not afraid of her clan, not afraid of their laws. His fear was only for her life, and that gave her a strange kind of strength. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing through the cracks in the wall, thunder shaking the ground. But inside the small shelter, the world felt different. The stones no longer cut into her back. The cold no longer ruled her bones. She was wrapped in warmth she had thought she would never feel again. For the first time in 17 nights, she closed her eyes without pain stabbing through her body. But even as she drifted towards sleep, her mind was torn. Gratitude swelled in her heart, but so did fear. What if tomorrow brought discovery? What if her people dragged her away and punished him for daring to help her? She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, a single tear slid down her cheek, unseen in the dim light. The human soldier sat against the wall, watching her as she lay under his cloak. He did not sleep. His eyes stayed sharp, his body ready, guarding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. He had broken a rule tonight, crossed a line he could never return from. But as he listened to the steady sound of her breathing, he knew he would make the same choice again. And somewhere deep in her half-dreaming mind, the alien girl realized that her life had changed forever. For 16 nights, she had belonged to the stones. On the 17th night, she belonged to hope, and that hope had a human face. The girl lay on the rough cot, wrapped in the heavy cloak that still carried the warmth of the human's body. Her eyes blinked slowly, as if she could not believe what she felt. The stones were gone. The cold wind was shut outside, and for the first time in 17 nights, she was not fighting the ground for sleep. Her trembling hands reached out and touched the fabric beneath her. It felt soft compared to the cruel hardness she had known. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Her heart was too full, tangled with fear and wonder. The human soldier sat close, his back against the wall, watching her quietly. His weapon rested near his hand, ready if danger came, but his eyes softened whenever they fell on her. He did not speak for a long time, letting her breathe, letting her body learn that safety was possible again. The sound of the storm outside had become a rhythm, steady and distant, like the heartbeat of the world. Inside, there was only silence between them, but it was not the silence of loneliness. It was a silence filled with questions neither of them knew how to ask. When she finally found her voice, it came out in a whisper, cracked and uncertain. "Why? You help me?" The words were simple, but they carried the weight of all her nights of pain. She did not expect an answer. No one had ever helped her without reason, and she thought perhaps he would reveal his price now. Her eyes watched him with suspicion, with fear, but also with a small spark of hope she could not kill. The human looked at her, his expression steady. He touched his chest with his hand, then pointed to her and said slowly, "Because you are alive, that is enough." She did not understand every word, but his tone carried truth. There was no hunger in his eyes, no greed, no claim. Only something she had never seen before, compassion. Her throat tightened and she turned her face away, ashamed. She remembered the voices of her people, the harsh laughter of her clan when they cast her out. They had called her worthless, broken, a burden that no one would carry. Now a stranger, an enemy by law, spoke as if her life had value. She could not understand it, The thought burned her heart with both pain and warmth. She pulled the cloak tighter around her and whispered, "I don't belong anywhere." Her voice cracked, as if the words were too heavy. The soldier leaned forward slightly, his brows drawing together. He did not need translation to understand her meaning. He had seen enough of her suffering to know what those words carried. His silence was his answer. But the way he looked at her made her feel something she had forgotten long ago, that maybe she was not invisible. She lay back again, but her eyes did not close. She kept watching him from the corner of her gaze. The storm outside began to calm, and the shelter grew quieter. Every breath she took was filled with his presence. Every small sound reminded her that she was not alone. For the first time, the silence did not scare her. But as the night grew deeper, a shadow moved outside the broken wall. The soldier noticed it first. His hand went to his weapon, his eyes sharpening. He stood silently and stepped to the opening, scanning the street with trained caution. The girl followed his movement with wide, fearful eyes. The shadow passed quickly, maybe just another traveler, maybe a spy. But the soldier's jaw tightened. Someone might have seen them. Someone might have noticed the girl was no longer lying on the stones. He returned to the cot, his steps careful, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Her heart sank. She knew what this meant. If the clan learned she had spent the night in a human's shelter, the punishment would be cruel, not just for her, but for him too. She sat up, her breath quick, her voice shaking. No one must see. They will tell. They will come. The soldier placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. His eyes met hers, calm even in the storm of danger. He did not need to say much. His gaze told her everything. He was ready to face whatever her people decided, ready to stand between her and the world that wanted her broken. Her lips trembled. She had spent so many nights wishing for death, but now the thought of losing this strange protector made her chest ache. She lowered her head, whispering almost to herself, "Why do I feel safe with you?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. The soldier heard her, though perhaps he did not understand every sound. But he saw the softness in her eyes, the way her hands stopped shaking as she held the cloak. Something changed in that moment, something fragile but real. She was no longer just a stranger to him. She was someone whose pain had become his fight. She lay back once more, closing her eyes. For the first time in many nights, her sleep came not from exhaustion but from comfort. Her breathing grew steady, and her face relaxed. The soldier watched her quietly, his weapon still close, his body still alert, but inside his heart he felt something new too. He had crossed the line between duty and choice. He was no longer watching her from the shadows. He was protecting her openly against the world if he had to. And as the dawn began to touch the sky outside, both of them, though in different ways, understood one truth. The girl had slept on stones for 16 nights, but now her place had changed. She had found warmth where she least expected it, in the bed and in the presence of a human who refused to let her die unseen. The morning light crept slowly into the small shelter, painting the walls with pale gray. The alien girl stirred under the heavy cloak, her body still weak but warmer than it had been in weeks. She opened her eyes and for a brief moment forgot where she was. Then the truth returned. She was not on the stones anymore, not out in the cold. She was lying in the bed of a human soldier. Her chest tightened with both fear and confusion. The soldier was already awake. He sat against the wall, his weapon across his knees, his eyes scanning the cracks of the shelter as if danger could arrive at any second. When he noticed she was awake, his face softened, and he gave her a small nod. He did not speak, but his silence carried more comfort than any words. She sat up slowly, clutching the cloak around herself. Her mind was full of thoughts she could not escape. If anyone saw her here, if her clan discovered she had spent the night under a human's roof, there would be no mercy. The law of her people was clear. A woman who shared a man's bed, human or not, was bound to him. And if that man was an outsider, both would face death for dishonor. Her heart pounded as she thought of it. The soldier seemed to sense her fear. He placed his weapon aside and leaned forward slightly, his voice calm. She did not understand all the words, but she understood his tone. He was telling her she was safe. Still, her hands shook as she whispered, "They will come. My clan will not forgive this." Her words proved true sooner than she expected. By midday, voices rose outside the shelter. Heavy boots struck the ground, and sharp commands echoed in the air. The soldier's head snapped up, his hand going instantly to his weapon. The girl froze, her breath caught in her throat. She knew those voices too well. Her clan's guards had come. The door burst open, and armored figures stepped inside, their eyes burning with fury. One of them pointed at the girl, shouting in their harsh tongue. She understood every word. "Shame! You have broken the sacred law." They turned their rage toward the human soldier, spitting insults and threats. To them, he was a thief who had taken what did not belong to him. The girl tried to speak, to explain, but her voice was drowned by their anger. She wanted to say that he had saved her life, that without him, she would have frozen to death on the stones. But her clan did not care for reasons. They cared only for rules. Her body shook as one of the guards declared the sentence. By our law, she is now his, a bond sealed in dishonor. Both will pay the price. The soldier stepped forward, placing himself between the girl and the guards. His weapon gleamed in his hand, his eyes cold and unyielding. He did not understand their language, but he understood their intent. He could see the fear in the girl's eyes, the way her body crumpled as if she expected chains to wrap around her. One of the guards lunged forward, but the soldier raised his weapon with deadly speed. The room froze. His voice rang out, firm and sharp, the sound cutting through the tension. "If your law says she belongs to me now," he said, his tone heavy with challenge, "then I will protect her as mine." The girl gasped. She did not expect those words. Her people treated the law like a curse, but he had turned it into a shield. The guards snarled, but hesitation flickered in their eyes. By their own traditions, his claim was not false. If he had taken her into his bed, then by sacred law, she was bound to him. To kill him now would be to dishonor their own code. The leader of the guards spat on the ground, his face twisted in rage. "Then you will face the council," he growled. "Let them decide your fate." With that, they withdrew, their eyes still burning with hate, but restrained by the weight of their own rules. When the sound of their footsteps faded, the girl collapsed onto the cot, her heart racing. She looked at the soldier, her voice trembling. "Why? Why would you do this? You risk death for me." Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. She was a burden, a castaway, yet he had stood against armed guards for her. The soldier knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Because you deserve to live," he said softly, though she understood more from his eyes than his words. In that moment, she realized something powerful. He was no longer just a stranger who had offered bread or a blanket. He was now her defender, her shield against the wrath of her own people. Fear still gnawed at her heart, but alongside it came a strange strength. For the first time since her exile, she felt she was not alone. The law of her clan had tried to chain her again, but the human had broken those chains with his defiance. As the day faded into night, she lay awake, staring at the roof of the shelter. Every thought twisted inside her. She had not chosen this path, but fate had forced it upon her. Yet when she remembered the way he stood in front of her, his body ready to take every blow meant for her, her fear softened. Perhaps being bound to him was not a curse after all. Outside, the city stirred with rumors. Whispers spread quickly. An alien girl had spent the night with a human, and by sacred law, she was now his mate. Some spoke with outrage, others with shock, but no one denied the story. The council would summon them soon, and the whole clan would judge. Inside the shelter, the girl clutched the cloak around her, her eyes drifting to the soldier who sat awake by the door, guarding her as always. A thought came to her, soft and frightening. Maybe this human, against every law and warning, had become the only person she should truly trust. The council chamber was vast, its stone pillars carved with the history of her people. Fires burned in tall braziers, their light flickering across the angry faces of the clan elders. The alien girl stood trembling at the center, her thin frame wrapped in the cloak the human had given her. Every eye in the hall burned into her, filled with judgment. To them, she was no longer a daughter of the clan. She was a stain on their honor. Beside her, the human soldier stood tall and unbending. His armor was scratched, his weapon strapped across his back, but his presence filled the hall like a storm. He did not bow his head, did not shrink under their stares. His gaze was calm, sharp, and ready. He had walked into the heart of their law with no fear, and that alone made the crowd uneasy. One of the elders slammed his staff on the ground, the sound echoing like thunder. "You have broken our sacred law," he shouted, his voice carrying through the chamber. "This girl lay in a human's bed. She has shamed us all. She belongs to him now, by law." The girl's knees weakened. The words cut into her like blades. She wanted to scream that she had not chosen this, that she had been freezing to death and the human had saved her life. But she knew her people did not care. Law was law. They would not listen. Her hands shook as she whispered, "Please, do not kill him." The human heard her voice, though he could not understand the words. He stepped forward, his deep voice rolling through the hall. "She belongs to no one. She chooses." His words confused the crowd, and murmurs rose like waves crashing on rocks. They expected him to claim her openly, to declare her his possession, but instead he shattered the very rule they held sacred. The council leader leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Do you reject the bond, human?" he demanded. "If you do, she will be cast out, and you will face death for daring to touch what is not yours." The air grew heavy. Everyone waited for his answer. The soldier's eyes burned like fire as he turned to the girl. For a moment, time stopped. His face softened, and his voice lowered, meant only for her. "It is not my choice. It is yours." He gave her the decision, something no one in her life had ever done. Her heart pounded. She felt every eye on her, felt the weight of her people's hatred pressing down. All her life, she had been told she was weak, worthless, something to be used or discarded. But now, this human, the outsider, the enemy, was offering her something greater than safety. He was offering her dignity. Tears filled her eyes as she raised her head. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew stronger, echoing through the hall. "I choose the human, not because law commands me, not because shame binds me. I choose him, because when no one else saw me, he did. When all of you left me on the stones, he gave me life." The chamber erupted in gasps and shouts. Some elders slammed their staffs in outrage. Others whispered in disbelief. No one had expected her to speak. No one had expected her to claim him by her own will. The human stood firm beside her, his hand resting near his weapon in case the crowd turned violent. But the council leader raised his hand for silence. His eyes studied the girl, then the soldier. Then the cloak draped around her shoulders. At last he spoke with a voice that rumbled like stone. "The law is clear. By your own word, you have chosen. By our tradition, the bond cannot be broken." The hall fell silent. The decision had been made. She was his now, not as a slave, not as a punishment, but by choice. The weight of the council's ruling pressed down, but in her heart, a strange light flickered. For the first time, she was not being forced. She had spoken for herself. The guards stepped forward, their eyes filled with fury, but they did not attack. Even in their anger, they could not break the sacred law once it had been spoken. They turned their faces away, their jaws clenched in bitter defeat. The girl clutched the cloak tighter, her tears flowing freely now, not from fear, but from release. The human placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steady and strong. His eyes met hers, and though he said nothing, she understood. He would stand beside her, no matter what storms came. She was no longer alone. As they left the chamber together, whispers followed them. Some voices hissed with hatred, others with awe, but none could erase what had happened. She had chosen. She had taken her place not as a castaway, not as a slave, but as a woman who had found her own strength. Outside, the air was sharp and cold, but she no longer felt it as she once had. The stones of suffering were behind her. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and enemies, but it was also filled with hope. She looked up at the human walking beside her, his steps steady, his presence like a shield, and she whispered softly, "You gave me back my life." He glanced at her, and a rare small smile touched his lips. No words were needed. In that moment, both knew that their bond was not just born of law or survival. It was born of choice, of trust, and of the courage to stand against a world that wanted them broken. And as the sun rose high above the city, its light spilling across the streets, the girl felt something she had never felt before. She was free, not because the world allowed it, but because she had claimed it for herself.